The spark that lit the region. For 12 days, the Middle East stood on the edge of something far bigger than war. Missiles crossed borders. Fighter jets disappeared from radar screens. Emergency meetings were held in underground bunkers. Oil markets trembled. And world leaders whispered into secure phones long after midnight. But what the public saw, the airstrikes, the speeches, the explosions, was only half the story. Because behind closed doors, intelligence chiefs, military planners, and political leaders were making decisions that would permanently reshape the balance of power in the region. This is the story of the 12 days that changed the Middle East forever, and what really happened when the cameras were turned off. Chapter 1. The Long Fuse. Before the explosion. To understand the 12 days, we must first understand the years, even decades, that led up to them. The Middle East has never been just a regional chessboard. Since the end of World War II, it has been the center of global power competition. The collapse of the Ottoman Empire after World War I left artificial borders drawn by European powers. After World War II, a new rivalry replaced colonial control, the Cold War. The United States and the Soviet Union turned the region into a strategic battleground. Oil, geography, ideology, everything mattered. When the Cold War ended and the Soviet Union collapsed in 1991, the United States emerged as the dominant power in the region. But dominance did not mean stability. The 2003 invasion of Iraq reshaped regional power structures. Saddam Hussein's removal did not create peace. Instead, it created a vacuum. That vacuum allowed new actors to rise, including Iran-backed militias across Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, and Yemen. Over the next 2 decades, the region slowly transformed into a web of proxy conflicts. The tension wasn't always visible, but it was always there. Chapter 2. The breaking point. The 12 days did not begin with a random strike. They began with a calculated move. Intelligence reports suggested that a major military asset, considered strategically unacceptable by rival powers, had crossed a red line. Behind the scenes, security cabinets met in emergency sessions. Satellite images were reviewed. Intelligence intercepts were analyzed. Then just before dawn on day 1, precision airstrikes were launched. The targets were not symbolic, they were strategic: military infrastructure, command centers, weapon storage facilities. Within hours, the region erupted in uncertainty. State media framed it as self-defense. Rival networks called it aggression. Global powers urged restraint publicly. Privately, however, something else was happening. The United States moved naval assets into the region. Carrier groups adjusted positions. Air defense systems were activated across multiple countries. Iran placed its missile forces on alert. Israel reinforced air defense batteries. Oil prices spiked overnight. This was no longer a localized strike. It was a test of thresholds. Chapter 3. The Hidden Calculations. Wars in the Middle East are rarely spontaneous. They are measured. Each side calculates escalation. How far can we go? What will trigger full retaliation? Where's the line? Behind closed doors, military strategists were modeling scenarios. If retaliation escalates, does it remain regional? Or does it trigger international involvement? Would Hezbollah enter the conflict from Lebanon? Would Gulf states be drawn in? Would American forces become direct participants? The world saw missile exchanges. What it did not see were the diplomatic backchannels. European diplomats quietly contacted Tehran. Gulf mediators opened communication channels. Washington and regional capitals exchanged warnings through indirect lines. The objective was clear: respond strongly enough to preserve deterrence, but not so strongly that it spirals into full-scale war. This delicate balance defined the 12 days. Chapter 4. Day 4. The Point of No Return. By day 4, the situation had intensified. Retaliatory strikes targeted military installations. Air defense systems intercepted incoming projectiles. Some did not. Civilian populations sheltered in bunkers. Airports temporarily closed. Stock markets dipped. But the most important developments were invisible. Intelligence agencies detected movement, not just of missiles, but of messaging. Signals suggested that both sides were preparing options for escalation, yet simultaneously signaling limits. It was a dangerous dance. One miscalculation could trigger something uncontrollable. Inside secure war rooms, leaders faced impossible choices: escalate and risk regional war, or de-escalate and appear weak. In the Middle East, perception is power. Chapter 5. The Superpower Factor. The Middle East does not operate in isolation. Every major escalation carries global consequences. The United States, still maintaining significant military presence in the region, had to consider the safety of its forces. Russia, with deep involvement in Syria, monitored airspace movements carefully. China, heavily dependent on Middle Eastern energy supplies, issued calls for restraint while quietly assessing economic impact. This was not just a regional crisis, it was a geopolitical stress test. Would alliances hold? Would deterrence fail? Would a localized conflict ignite a broader confrontation? Behind the scenes, intelligence sharing intensified between allies. Missile defense coordination increased, and most importantly, emergency diplomacy accelerated. Chapter 6. The Turning Point. Around day 8, something shifted. Retaliation continued, but the intensity plateaued. Strikes became more symbolic than strategic. Public rhetoric remained fiery. Speeches were defiant. Media narratives were aggressive. But the frequency of direct, high-value targets decreased. This was not accidental. It signaled that both sides had achieved something. One had demonstrated capability, the other had demonstrated resilience. The goal was no longer victory, it was controlled containment. Chapter 7. What the public wasn't told. While headlines focused on explosions, negotiations were quietly underway. Back-channel diplomacy is a hallmark of Middle Eastern crises. Messages are rarely direct. They pass through intermediaries. Oman, Qatar, European states. The language is coded. If attacks stop, responses will stop. If red lines are respected, stability can return. By day 10, the framework for de-escalation was forming, not publicly, but structurally. The 12th day did not end with a peace treaty. It ended with silence. And sometimes in geopolitics, silence is the loudest signal of all. The illusion of calm. By the end of the 12 days, the region appeared calmer. No full-scale war, no invasion, no regime collapse. But something fundamental had changed. Deterrence lines were redrawn. Military capabilities were tested in real time. Alliances were reassessed. And perhaps most importantly, every actor learned something about the other's limits. The public saw 12 days of crisis. What they didn't see were the private realizations that would shape the next decade. Because when missiles stop flying, the real strategy begins. And in part 2, we will uncover who gained the most, who lost quietly, and why these 12 days may have made the next conflict inevitable. Who really won, and what comes next. A war that didn't become a war. For 12 days, the Middle East moved through controlled chaos. Missiles flew, air defense systems lit up the night sky, naval fleets repositioned, leaders delivered defiant speeches. But a full-scale regional war never erupted. Which raises the most important question. If no one declared victory, who actually won? And more importantly, what changed permanently? Chapter 8. The strategic winners and quiet losers. In modern conflicts, victory is rarely measured by territory captured. It is measured by deterrence, perception, and long-term positioning. During those 12 days, each major actor had a specific objective. Some achieved theirs, some didn't. Warren. Israel's objective: reassert deterrence. For Israel, the goal was clear. Demonstrate that certain military developments would not be tolerated. By launching precise, high-value strikes early, it reinforced a message. Red lines still exist. Militarily, the operation showed deep strike capability, intelligence, penetration, rapid response precision. However, the retaliation it faced also revealed vulnerabilities, particularly the strain on missile defense systems and the psychological impact of sustained alerts. Israel restored deterrence, but also learned it is no longer operating in a one-sided escalation ladder. 2. Iran's objective: prove resilience. It was for regional militias watching closely. In geopolitical terms, endurance can be as powerful as dominance. 3. The United States controlled containment. The United States had a delicate balancing act it needed to protect regional allies, prevent escalation into full war, avoid direct entanglement. Naval repositioning and air defense coordination signaled readiness, without triggering open confrontation. The message was subtle but strong. Escalation would not be allowed to spiral. But America also faced a reality. Regional actors were now capable of engaging in high-intensity exchanges without immediately collapsing into chaos. The monopoly on escalation control has weakened. Chapter 9. The Gulf States and the Silent Calculations. Perhaps the most nervous observers during the 12 days were Gulf states. Countries like Saudi Arabia and the UAE understand that any prolonged conflict would threaten energy infrastructure, maritime routes, economic stability. Behind closed doors, Gulf leaders prioritized one objective: prevent expansion. Diplomatic channels were activated, oil production stability became strategic leverage, energy markets remained functional, barely. The Gulf states emerged with a reinforced lesson. They cannot rely solely on external powers for security. Regional self-balancing is becoming unavoidable. Chapter 10. The military lessons that changed everything. While the headlines focused on explosions, military analysts were studying something far more important: performance. Air defense under real stress. Missile interception rates became global case studies. How effective were layered defense systems? What gaps appeared? What saturation levels were tested? Defense planners worldwide examined the data. Drone and precision warfare. Evolution drones and precision-guided munitions played a decisive role. The conflict showed how relatively lower-cost systems could challenge advanced defenses. This wasn't just a regional lesson, it was a global one. Future wars will not look like the wars of 2003. They will be faster, smarter, more technologically saturated. The cyber shadow. Although not publicly acknowledged, cyber operations intensified during the 12 days. Communication systems experienced disruptions. Financial systems reported anomalies. Information warfare surged online. The battlefield was physical, but also digital. And digital escalation leaves fewer visible scars, but deeper strategic impact. Chapter 11. The psychological shift. Perhaps the most significant transformation wasn't military. It was psychological. Before the 12 days, many believed that a major direct confrontation would immediately spiral into uncontrollable regional war. After the 12 days, a new perception emerged. Limited high-intensity exchanges are possible and survivable. That realization is dangerous, because once leaders believe escalation can be managed, they may take greater risks in the future. The fear barrier has been lowered. Chapter 12. The energy. Weapon that wasn't used. The global oil markets braced for disruption. Strait of Hormuz shipping lanes were monitored closely. Insurance premiums for tankers fluctuated. But large-scale energy shutdown never occurred. Why? Because energy is the ultimate escalation lever. Once used, it cannot easily be reversed. Keeping oil flowing was a strategic choice. It reassured global markets. It prevented outside powers from intervening more aggressively. It kept the crisis contained. But the message was clear. The option exists, and that option alone shapes future negotiations. Chapter 13. The diplomacy that saved the region. Publicly, leaders were defiant. Privately, diplomats were exhausted. Backchannels through Oman, Qatar, and European intermediaries intensified. Messages were simple. No further expansion. No attacks on civilian infrastructure. No crossing of ultimate red lines. De-escalation frameworks were quietly agreed upon, without formal announcements. This is how modern Middle Eastern crises often end. Not with signatures, but with mutual understanding of limits. Chapter 14. Who actually gained the most? In strategic terms, the biggest winner may not be a country. It may be the concept of calibrated escalation. The 12 days proved that direct exchanges can occur without total war. Superpowers prefer containment over confrontation. Regional actors are increasingly autonomous. However, this also introduces a long-term risk, frequent controlled crises, short wars, recurring escalations, a region permanently living in cycles of tension. Chapter 15. The long-term consequences. The 12 days did not redraw borders, they redrew calculations. Future conflicts will now be planned with new assumptions. Missile defense systems will be expanded. Cyber capabilities will be prioritized. Energy routes will receive heavier security investment. Proxy networks will be strengthened quietly. The region has entered a new phase. Not full war, not full peace. Strategic competition under controlled fire. Chapter 16. The most dangerous outcome. Ironically, the absence of full war may be the most dangerous outcome. Why? Because unresolved tensions remain. Core disputes were not solved, only paused. The 12 days acted like a stress test. They revealed strengths, they exposed weaknesses, and every military planner is now adjusting for the next round. Because in geopolitics, every crisis teaches preparation. Final reflection. What really happened behind closed doors? What happened behind closed doors was not chaos, it was calculation. Leaders measured retaliation like mathematicians. Diplomats negotiated while missiles were still in the air. Superpowers balanced presence with restraint. And by day 12, everyone understood something new. The Middle East has entered a new era of managed confrontation. Not total war, not lasting peace, but a strategic gray zone, where every move is calibrated and every pause is temporary. The bigger question. Will the next 12 days be as controlled? Or will one miscalculation finally break the balance? History shows us something important. Conflicts rarely repeat the same way twice, but they always build on previous lessons. The 12 days changed the Middle East forever, not because of what exploded, but because of what was learned. And that is what really happened behind closed doors. If you found this deep analysis valuable and want more long-form historical breakdowns that go beyond headlines, make sure to like this video, subscribe to 60-Second History, and turn on notifications so you never miss the next untold story shaping our world. Because history isn't just about the past, it's about understanding the future before it arrives. See you in the next episode.